Hello students, welcome to EPG Patashala. I am Dr. Prabhu Jirli from Banaras Hindu University. Today we are going to talk on a module History of Extension Services, especially the pre-independence extension efforts from the paper Concept and Dimensions of Extension Education. The basic objective of this particular module is to understand the extension service activities planned and implemented before independence. It is evident from the history that the villages of Indian subcontinent were self-contained. This is what the history tells us. Self-sufficient and self-governed. Almost there was no need of intervention of any external agency into the village system. Hardly there was any need for the social welfare activities by an agencies. But now the question arises how this situation has seen drastic changes. Over a period of time, it was disturbed by the various invaders India has seen for about more than 3 centuries. Because of these invasions, the social structure of the villages started disintegrating over a period of time. And at the far end of the 19th century, the subcontinent has suffered many severe droughts and famines. This is a natural calamity, and the another calamity that the Indian subcontinent had seen was from the invaders, which led to the disintegration of the village structure and the village systems what we had. Because of this natural calamity, what I said regarding the severe droughts and famines, because of which the government was forced to appoint a commission which recommended the rural development work in the early part of that century. Even though the extension services were part of Indian culture, as we said in one of our previous discussions, yes, providing service to the people, it is part of the culture that we have in India. But now we have a stream of an organization to provide the services, and we try to identify it as an extension. But in older days, they were not termed it as extension services. But in the current situation, the same set of services what we were providing them historically now are being termed as extension services. Also, there was no proper documentation of the services provided by the then established government, may it be the princely states or may it be whatever the form of the government what we had, but they were not documented in an appropriate manner. In the early part of this 20th century, efforts were made to document and present was the success story of other regions for motivating towards the development. In the early part, then we started document because the problem that we observed in the previous years that should not happen. So then we started identifying the efforts that are being done in different parts of the country, and definitely it served as a source of motivation for the forthcoming extension activities. Now, we will be understanding these extension activities, especially in the pre-independence era in the early 1900s one by one. As a part of pre-independence extension efforts, let us try to understand the first program as a Rural Reconstruction Scheme, which was launched in 1903 by Sri Daniel Hamilton. The objective of the program was to create model villages based on the cooperative principles in the province of Bengal. The modus operandi adopted for the purpose was to establish Central Cooperative Bank and Cooperative Marketing Society. Time and again, we have been emphasizing on people coming together or formation of the people into groups. Number one, the reasons behind are the land holdings of the farmers are very less, and because of that they are not having the bargaining power in the market. Hence, they are being organized into groups. Through these institutions, that is, the cooperative bank and the marketing societies, through these institutions, an effort was made to organize people into groups. When people come together, there is bound to happen something. This something happening is contributing for development. Through cooperative banks and society was served with the financial support, which is very, very essential for bringing any change. The effort of Rural Reconstruction Scheme established Rural Reconstruction Institute in 1934 for imparting training in cottage and subsidiary industries, which was the need of the hour in those days, so that their capacity building and the skill enhancement initiatives can be taken up through these institutions known as Rural Reconstruction Institute. Okay, friends, after understanding the extension efforts done by Sir Daniel Hamilton in the province of Bengal, now let us move on to the Shantiniketan attempt or the Sriniketan attempt. Both are synonymously used. This particular experiment was taken up by Rabindranath Tagore ji. The moment we come across the name of Rabindranath Tagore, immediately we come across a good number of qualities that Rabindranath Tagore had. He was a writer, he was a freedom fighter, he was a very good artist. There are so many such qualities Rabindranath Tagore ji possessed. Apart from all these things, he was a philanthropist. As a philanthropist, he launched a development program in the village near Sriniketan campus, which was his dream project of providing education to the people, in which he established the Institute of Agriculture Sciences, which is also known as the Sriniketan campus or the Palli Shiksha Bhavan of Vishwa Bharati, the central university established by Rabindranath Tagore. The name of the village wherein he started this development initiatives is Surul. The basic idea of development means initiating the developmental activities was the general backwardness of that region. Now, what type of activities that we can bring in to that region so that there will be some change in the socio-economic conditions. The objectives with which Rabindranath Tagore ji started this Shantiniketan attempt includes the first one, to create a real interest in people for rural welfare work. Even today, we are facing the same problem. People want to study the concept of rural development, but are they really interested in working for rural development? This is the question to be addressed at a national level. So, coming to way back in the year 1908, Rabindranath Tagore was also working on this line, how we can motivate the people to take up these welfare activities in the rural areas. The second objective was to study the rural problems and to translate conclusions into actions. The first part of this objective is very obvious. Yes, the class of functionaries who are taking up these developmental activities in that region are going to study the problems. But you look into the second part of this objective, which is very, very important. That is translation of conclusions into actions. Even today, in many of the developmental programs, we find there is lack of translation of conclusions into actions. Even at the government level, maybe the central or at the state level or at the panchayat level, the institutions take the decisions. Yes, this type of activity should be taken up, but is it going to be realized? It's a big question mark. That is why Rabindranath Tagore took that particular point and he said that we should translate all conclusions into actions. Then the next objective with which that he started this particular program was to help the villagers to develop their own resources. It seems to be a very simple sentence and a very common sentence to read and to remember, but it has lots of meaning in it. What is that resource that we are referring to? Are we able to understand the resources which are available in and around us? So, did we identify the thing that is with us and surrounding us as a resource? And have we made any attempt to exploit that resource for bringing in some socio-economic changes? All these were the questions that were hidden in that particular objective in the program launched by Tagore. Then, the need of the hour, it was there in 1908 also, and it is there in 2015 also, that is improvement of the village sanitation. Now, coming on to the modus operandi, how he could take up this particular objective and how he implemented the program of his dream. For satisfying the objectives that we discussed so far, he organized and motivated youth. That was the class of functionary which he thought that this is the group which can make the objectives into reality, who can translate my dreams into reality at the field level. So, that is why he concentrated on the youth. The second method that he adopted was the village leadership is the panacea for problems of rural panacea for the problems of the rural people. If we have appropriate leadership at appropriate place, then we are not at all facing any problem. In management, there is a principle that we study is a place for everything and everything in its place, which says that we should identify a particular person for a right person for taking up a right particular activity. This is what Rabindranath Tagore did through his particular project of identifying the appropriate leaders for taking up appropriate activities. The next method that he adopted was the self-help is the best help. After more than a century, even today, now we are talking of self-help. We have self-help groups in a larger way. As the data of NABARD says, there are more than 7.5 million self-help groups that are in operation throughout the country. This was the thing that he emphasized way back in over a century, that self-help is the best help. He said that you are the person to decide your destiny, what type of things that you need and what type of things that you can get from the society, that depends on you. That is what is the concept of self-help. And he conducted the demonstrations in the fields of the farmers to convince the benefits of the improved practices. This has the special reference to agriculture. In case of agriculture, until and unless we demonstrate the outcomes of the technology, the receivers are not going to understand and adopt the methodologies what the extension is going to suggest. But one of the limitation is it is having a long gestation period. If we want to demonstrate the potential of a particular crop, at least it takes 100 days. We should have a lot of patience. That is what the concept of demonstration is dealing with. It is not that we cannot show them the seeds and this is the crop and you need to adopt. No, nobody can understand that. But how can we understand? How can we adopt? How can we be motivated? It is only by seeing the output. For having a view of that output, you need to wait for around 100 days depending on the crop. So, that is why he used to organize the demonstrations. He established a dairy to supply milk and the better milch animals. The concept of having the pedigree as well as making improvements in the nutritional aspects of animal, that was thought of way back 100 years back. So, with these particular programs, so that we can bring the changes and it is going to help the agricultural operations also, was one of the methodology that was adopted by Tagore ji. Next point that he emphasized on the women empowerment, and they created a class of women functionaries named Brati Balika. In good number of programs, we see the lack of participation of women. Even today, this is the situation. In good number of programs, we come across this, there is lack of participation of women. You think of those situations, what type of norms that were existing in the traditional society, but even then he emphasized upon women empowerment and participation of the women. For that thing, he organized a group of women as a scouts, self-motivated people to take up the developmental initiatives among that particular region. So, that was the methodology of Rabindranath Tagore ji. There was a special emphasis on rural literacy among the rural population. At that moment only he realized that until and unless we educate the people, we cannot overcome any of the problems that the country is facing. Even today, the governments are working on these lines. Yes, there is a paradigm shift as far as education is considered and as far as the literacy is considered. The literacy at the moment when we obtained our independence was at the meager percentage, but now it has raised to a satisfactory figure of around 74% of the total population at the national level is having illiteracy. Even though the situation is not that satisfactory because it also includes the neoliterates. So, now there are good amount of effort needs to be done to improve the literacy level, so that it is going to act as the solution for the problems that what we are facing. So, in this manner, Rabindranath Tagore ji organized the class of functionary so that they themselves can bring in good number of changes in their areas by concentrating on various resources that are at their disposal. When you look into the operations like agriculture, what are the resources that we are emphasizing upon? It is your land, it is the water, it is the information that is prevailing in and around you, it is the potential crop varieties that are available in and around the region. Various resources are at your disposal only. For example, for conservation of the water, what type of efforts that what we are making? We allow the rainwater to flow to join the rivers or streams, then that the river is going to join the major seas in the vicinity. So, ultimately the water is going waste or not being utilized for the purpose it should have been. This is one of the important resource. There are good number of efforts that we see in different parts of the country. Conservation of the water is possible only with the community involvement, and there are many such resources at our disposal that Tagore ji emphasized, and he motivated people to accept these things and to bring in the changes. The program, as we discussed since the beginning, we did not see any financial support from any of the agencies, and in the beginning itself we said that this is one of the philanthropic approach, and Tagore ji was a great philanthropist. Yes, he was a big Jamindar of the Bengal province, and he had good amount of financial resources with him. He was the sole supplier of the financial support to this particular program. Since there was lack of funds, because one individual, how long he can support such programs and for how many villages that he can support, there was a limitation. So, it was difficult to conduct the research oriented studies because of lack of funds and to learn from them. So, that was the major thing that what we could observe out of this experiment. Hence, the project could not expand beyond the cluster of 8 villages surrounding the name of the village what we discussed in the beginning as a Surul. So, but this particular experiment, the Shantiniketan attempt, gave us good number of insights of how we can bring the people together and how we can extract the work from them and how we can motivate them to be responsible for changing themselves as well as their surroundings and their villages. And there are some other programs which are having similar inputs and insights that we will be discussing in the next part of our discussion. So far, we were making an effort to understand the Shantiniketan attempt started by Shri Rabindranath Tagore ji. After that, let us come on to the Gurgaon experiment launched by F.L. Braine in the year 1920. F.L. Braine was a government officer of the rank of district magistrate, conceived a dream of mass rural upliftment in his area of operation. The emphasis of the experiment was on increasing farm yields, curtailing expenditure on social and religious functions, improving health standards, and organizing welfare programs. Looking into the nature of objectives set forth, agriculture was inseparable component of ensuring development. Rather, it is the base of other developmental initiatives. Basically, the experiment was initiative of changing the attitude of the people. With the changing attitude, change can be introduced in the society. May it be increasing agricultural production, curtailing expenditure on social and religious functions, etc. Changing attitude plays a key role. To achieve the said objectives, the modus operandi adopted for the experiment was appointment of a village guide. The village guide was expected to be a carrier of change in the villages. He is expected to be bridge between the development departments and village communities. Also, there was some support from the government by allocating rupees 1 crore for the purpose. There were some breaks in the experiment in the form of transfer of the officer where the activities came to standstill, and when the officer was brought back, the efforts gained momentum. Over a period of time, the experiment could not sustain because it could not develop any leadership. But the positive aspect of the experiment was if we provide an opportunity, people are going to respond to it. A dedicated and trained worker supported with technological and technical inputs can change the scenario. This learning is the contribution of Gurgaon experiment. Marthandam attempt. Marthandam attempt was launched by Spencer Hatch in 1921. Launched in Travancore of Kerala state with the support of Young Men Christian Association, basically a religious institution, targeted three-folded development of community. Hence, they emphasized on development of spirit, mind, and body. Means the stress was on spiritual, mental, and physical development of community. To achieve this, they launched five-sided program in addition to the above said elements, that is the spiritual, mental, and physical development of community. Economic and social development were also included. The modus operandi for achieving the objective was self-help with intimate expert counsel. Educational activities like demonstrations were used to motivate people to use agricultural implements. People were educated about various cottage vocations. Since the producers were small and marginal, marketing of the produce was also thought of by organizing people into groups. Depending on the produce, the communities were organized into different clubs, namely egg selling club, honey club, bull club, weavers club, etc. Today, the government has introduced the concept of self-help group, producer companies, etc. They are similar to the efforts launched about a century back. Yes, over a period of time, there is some modification in the approach, but the approach remains same, coming together and growing together. Gandhian constructive programs. Apart from various contributions of Gandhiji at national and international levels, he always emphasized on village should be the center of development. There are enormous gifts of Gandhiji for the nation. From the point of view of development, his greatest contribution was he made us to realize that India lives in villages and common man's upliftment is the upliftment of the country. Coming to the issues, how Gandhiji wanted to achieve this. He had a great idea of basic principles of Gandhian economy include the first one, decentralized production. So, this was the point of contention between the first Prime Minister Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru and Mahatma Gandhiji. Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru was for mass production, but Mahatma Gandhiji was for production by masses. Because of that, there was a slight difference of opinion between these two great personalities. The argument of Mahatma Gandhiji included if we are including the mass for production, then many of the people will get an opportunity to be part of the production and their livelihoods are ensured. The second point of Gandhian economy included equitable distribution of resources. The person who is contributing for any event or an activity in whatever the capacity, he should get his due. So that is what is the premise of equitable distribution. Depending on your capacity, depending on your ability, depending on your skill, your income is going to be increased or decreased. If you contribute, if you pay your time, or if you devote your time, if you have skills, definitely you are going to realize that. And Gandhiji said that you should be recognized with your skills, with your knowledge, and with your various inputs and the qualities, and based on that there should be distribution of resources. That's what is equitable distribution of resources. Then the third point he emphasized was self-sufficiency of Indian villages. Villages are going to be self-sufficient when we provide an opportunity for individual to make realize his dream in the village. Otherwise, there will be movement to urban areas. If the number increases, then the village becomes dependent rather than self-sufficient. So, this is the reason why Gandhiji was emphasizing on the self-reliance of Indian villages, so that we should provide maximum number of opportunities for the youth in the villages. Gandhiji established various institutions throughout the country to emphasize on involvement of the grassroots level people in the production process. The list of institutions established by Gandhiji include, just I will be giving you a few institutions, names of the institutions in different parts of the country. All India Spinners Association, All India Village Industries Association, Go Seva Sangh, Khadi Vidyalay in Sevagram, Khadi Ashram in Tiruchigondi, Gandhi Niketan in Kallupatti, Gandhi Gram in Dindigal, Gandhi Seva Sadan in Porur, and Kasturba Ashram in Trichur. These are few to name here. There are good number of other institutions that were established by Gandhiji, so that he wanted to realize the dream of self-sufficiency of Indian villages through these institutions. Adarsh Seva Sangh. Adarsh Seva Sangh was established by Colonel Shitole in the village known as Pohri near Gwalior. The aim of Adarsh Seva Sangh was to increase per capita income of villagers. To achieve the aim, Village Reconstruction Society was formed in every village in the operational area. These societies were the institutions responsible for diffusion of innovations. As we have seen in earlier examples, that with the committed leadership, change in the desired manner can be introduced. For bringing in the mass awareness, Adarsh Seva Sangh published monthly known as Rural India, through which people were motivated to be the part of change process and be the carrier of change. Servants of India Society was established by Shri Gopal Krishna Gokhale in Pune in the year 1905. The person who brought and taught political life to Gandhiji was Gopalakrishna Gokhale. He was also having concern for introducing developmental initiatives in rural areas. To achieve the objective, they established training centers in village to impart training on agriculture and cottage industries. There is organic relationship between the agriculture and cottage industries in villages. Cottage industries support agriculture by providing implements and other inputs. In turn, agriculture provides raw material to these cottage industries. Hence, all development thinkers emphasized on development of small scale and cottage industries. Compared to other nations, India is having maximum number of people depending on agriculture. Hence, the issue becomes more pertinent in this regard. Village should be the center of development, otherwise there will be imbalanced growth in the nation. It happened to majority of extent. Now the institutions are opening their eyes and making all possible efforts to provide urban facilities in rural areas. Even though the Sangha was established in Pune, Maharashtra, it was operational in various states like Madhya Pradesh, Uttar Pradesh, and Orissa. The beauty of organization is still it is active in these areas and working for the cause of development. Apart from these, the developmental initiatives of Sangha published books on basic education, labor problems, indebtedness, etc. The program, known as Indian Village Service, was launched by Arthur T. Mosher and B. N. Gupta in the year 1945. Both the development workers launched the initiative with the objective of assisting village people to realize the best in their own village by developing individuals, volunteers, local agencies, and enabling them in helping themselves and others. When we look into the elements of the objectives, it goes back to the Gandhian ideology of development. The first element is realizing the best in your own village, leads to the identification of the resources. This process helps in demarcating the resources we have with ourselves and what we need from outside. The next element was developing villagers. Individuals and volunteers means human resource development. This is what is essential for ensuring the development. Quality human resource is always in demand. If we can decentralize the process to village level, the development gets momentum. For achieving the objective, the technique used was personal contact, informal group discussions, demonstrations, production of audio-visual aids, etc. The operational area was about 15 villages near Allahabad. The financial support came from individual contributions and donations from the community. Students, so far we have seen 8 different programs or the experiments or the attempts, as it was titled differently, which were happening in the pre-independence period. Going through the journey of pre-independence extension development initiatives, majority of these efforts were organized by an individual. It was the idea of an individual who initiated that and who went through that and who implemented that. There was no government support for the developmental initiatives of these individuals. So, this is one of the typical nature of the programs that we discussed so far. Lack of financial support, lack of leadership, etc. were some reasons behind the short span of these initiatives. These two things are interrelated. If you want to have the greater span, we need to have the regular continuous financial support. Because there was no financial support, that is how the span was reduced. And because of that, the program could not develop appropriate leadership, that what we would have thought while initiating the program. That is another reason why the program could not continue for longer period. The programs were also location and technology specific. Obviously, because of lack of financial support, it was looked specific to a particular region, and the needs of the people, the technological needs of the people at that region. The future extension programs should learn from the past programs and then go for planning and implementation of new extension programs, and that is what which happened in the post independence period that we will be discussing in our next part of the lecture. Thank you.